Bullies throw rocks at quiet girl. Huge error. She was a kung fu master. Juniper Kellaway drifted through Roosevelt High School like a shadow. Her slight frame barely reached 5'3", hidden under oversized sweaters and wire-rimmed glasses. Dark auburn hair fell across her face like a curtain. She'd transferred from San Francisco when her family moved to this Ohio town, and fitting in had proven impossible. The cafeteria buzzed with lunch chaos. Juniper sat alone near windows, eating her sandwich while reading. She preferred solitude, though not by choice. Attempts at conversation met polite but distant responses, so she'd accepted her role as the invisible new girl. "Look at her sitting there like a weirdo," came a voice 3 tables away. Braxton Sheffield, Roosevelt's unofficial king, held court with his crew. 6 feet tall, with perfect blonde hair and quarterback confidence, he commanded attention everywhere. His leather jacket and expensive clothes proclaimed his status. Beside him sat Mackenzie Torres, sharp-featured with calculating green eyes and elaborate braided hair. Her makeup was precise as a weapon. The third member was Dakota Mills, a massive linebacker whose scowl served as muscle when Braxton's words needed enforcement. "She probably doesn't speak English properly," Mackenzie laughed like breaking glass. "I heard her talking yesterday with this weird accent." Juniper's grip tightened on her book, but she kept reading. Silence was her best defense. What they didn't know was her weird accent came from summers with her grandmother in Chinatown, learning Mandarin alongside Wing Chun Kung Fu. The bell rang. Students filtered toward classrooms. Juniper gathered her things slowly, hoping to avoid confrontations. She had literature next, one class where she felt comfortable discussing symbolism. Walking toward the English wing, she noticed Tyler Brennan struggling with his overloaded backpack near lockers. He had warm brown eyes, sandy hair, and a gentle demeanor that resonated with her. He'd actually made eye contact during her first week, offering acknowledgement nods. "Need help?" Juniper surprised herself by asking. Tyler looked up, face brightening. "Actually, yeah. Everything keeps falling while I search for my English notes." His voice carried a slight southern drawl. Juniper held his textbook while he searched. It was her first real interaction since arriving, and Tyler's kindness made her feel visible in a good way. "Thanks," he said, finding his notebook. "You're in Mrs. Henderson's lit class, right?" "Yeah, 4th period." She handed back his book, their fingers brushing briefly. "You sit near the back." "I like observing before participating." He grinned, and Juniper felt something flutter in her chest. Locker doors slammed harshly. Braxton appeared with his entourage, eyes focusing on their interaction with predatory intensity. Well, the quiet mouse found herself a boyfriend," Braxton announced loudly. Students slowed, sensing entertainment. Tyler straightened determinedly. "Leave her alone, Braxton." "Or what?" Dakota stepped forward, using his size to loom over Tyler. "You gonna do something?" Juniper felt familiar chest tightness from unwanted attention. She wanted to disappear but didn't want Tyler hurt because of her. "It's fine," she said quietly, stepping back. "We should get to class." Braxton's smile was all teeth. "Smart girl. Come on, Tyler. You can do better than some weird new girl who barely talks." The warning bell rang. Students hurried to classrooms. Braxton's crew sauntered away, but Mackenzie shoulder-checked Juniper hard enough to send her stumbling. "You okay?" Tyler asked, steadying her. Juniper nodded, but inside burned with humiliation. Apparently just existing was sufficient provocation. Literature passed in a blur of Gatsby discussions. Juniper felt distracted, knowing she'd become visible to wrong people. Mrs. Henderson called on her twice, earning approving nods, but she felt Braxton's eyes across the room. After class, Juniper lingered with a question. When she finally left, hallways had mostly emptied except for stragglers. Walking toward the science wing, she heard 3 sets of purposeful footsteps behind her. "Hey, new girl." Juniper's steps faltered. She'd almost reached chemistry class when Mackenzie's voice cut through air like a blade. "We're talking to you." Juniper stopped, turning slowly. They'd positioned themselves in a semicircle, blocking her path. The hallway felt longer and emptier. "We wanted a little chat," Braxton said casually. "Tyler's been our friend since middle school, and we don't like seeing him confused by the wrong kind of girl." "I don't want trouble," Juniper said quietly. "Good." Mackenzie stepped closer, green eyes glittering with malice. "Then you'll find somewhere else to eat lunch, and avoid certain people out of your league." "She probably doesn't understand what we're saying," Dakota laughed. "Do you speak English, or just weird foreigner stuff?" The words hit like physical blows, but Juniper kept her expression neutral. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "The reed that bends in the storm survives while the mighty oak falls." "I understand," she said simply. "Smart girl," Braxton smiled predatorily. "We knew you'd be reasonable." They walked away, leaving Juniper with racing heart and trembling hands. She made it through chemistry on autopilot. The next days established predictable patterns. Juniper arrived early, found empty classrooms or library for breakfast, navigated by avoiding Braxton's territories. She discovered they'd claimed the main staircase, so she took longer routes through science wings. But avoidance only worked so long in buildings with limited hallways. The first direct confrontation happened Tuesday morning near the gym. Juniper found her path blocked by the trio plus backup, students orbiting Braxton's circle, eager for entertainment. "Look who's sneaking around," Mackenzie announced loudly. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" "Notice what?" Juniper asked, confused. "You've been avoiding us," Dakota cracked knuckles theatrically. "That's rude." "We're trying to help you fit in," Braxton added with false sincerity, "but you act too good to talk to us." A crowd gathered, sensing drama. Juniper noticed Tyler at the edge, face tight with concern, but she shook her head almost imperceptibly. She didn't want him becoming another target. "I'm not avoiding anyone," Juniper said carefully. "I just like quiet places." "How convenient," Mackenzie mocked. "We think you need to learn social skills." Without warning, Dakota knocked Juniper's backpack from her shoulder. Books and papers scattered across linoleum, her organized binder exploding open, sending notes flying everywhere. "Oops," he said with exaggerated innocence. "Looks like you dropped something." Laughter rippled through gathered students as Juniper knelt, collecting scattered belongings. Papers slid under lockers, her calculator skittered down the hallway. Her face burned with embarrassment as she crawled on hands and knees while the crowd watched. "I think she likes being down there," Braxton's voice carried clearly. "Suits her, don't you think?" More laughter. Juniper's hands moved methodically, collecting papers while inside she felt something small and hard forming in her chest. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more focused. Tyler broke free and knelt beside her, helping gather notes. "This is messed up," he said quietly. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." When she finally stood, backpack reassembled and dignity hanging by threads, the crowd had mostly dispersed. Only Braxton remained, wearing satisfied superiority. "See you around, new girl," he said like a threat. That afternoon, Juniper found herself in the public library, researching bus schedules. Maybe she could convince her parents to let her finish online. Maybe transferring again wouldn't be worst thing. But sitting in the quiet reference section, she remembered her grandmother's hands moving through precise Wing Chun forms, teaching that true strength came from understanding when and how to apply force with perfect efficiency. "Violence is never the first choice," her grandmother had said during training sessions, "but when all other options are exhausted, you must be prepared to defend yourself and others who cannot defend themselves." The next incident happened during lunch period 1 week later. Juniper had taken to eating in the library, where Mrs. Chang let her have quiet meals. Walking back from returning a novel, she turned the corner near Auto Shop and found Tyler backed against lockers, facing Dakota and two football players. "We told you to stay away from certain people," one was saying. "Maybe you need a reminder about loyalty." Tyler's nose was bleeding, shirt wrinkled from being grabbed and shoved, but his eyes held steady. "I'll talk to whoever I want." "Wrong answer." Dakota raised his fist, and Juniper felt something snap inside her chest like a rubber band pulled too tight. "Stop." The word came out louder and clearer than intended. All four students turned to look at her. The hallway went perfectly silent, except for distant lawnmower sounds. "Walk away," Dakota said dismissively. "This doesn't concern you." But Juniper was already moving. She'd spent hundreds of hours practicing Wing Chun's flowing movements, learning to redirect force rather than meet it head-on. Understanding efficiency trumped raw power. Her grandmother taught the art was like water, soft enough to flow around obstacles, powerful enough to carve through stone. Dakota outweighed her by 80 pounds with 6 inches height advantage. Any rational person would seek help or run. But Juniper had moved beyond rational thought into spaces where training and instinct took over. When Dakota swung his fist toward her face, Juniper stepped inside the punch arc and redirected his momentum with a simple tan sao movement that sent him stumbling past her into lockers. The metallic crash echoed like a gunshot. "What the hell?" One friend stepped forward, but Juniper was already resetting her stance. Weight balanced on her feet balls, hands positioned in classic Wing Chun guard. "I said stop," she repeated, voice carrying quiet authority of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. Dakota recovered quickly, face red with embarrassment and rage. "You little freak, I'm gonna..." He lunged forward with both hands outstretched, trying to grab her shoulders, but Juniper anticipated the move. She performed perfect bong sao deflection that knocked his arms aside, while simultaneously stepping forward with a palm strike catching him in the solar plexus with surgical precision. Dakota doubled over, gasping for air. Suddenly the hallway didn't feel so empty anymore. Students emerged from classrooms and corridors, drawn by commotion. "Holy crap," someone whispered. "Did she just drop Dakota Mills?" The two remaining football players looked uncertainly between their gasping teammate and the small girl standing calmly with hands still raised defensively. "You guys should help your friend to the nurse's office," Tyler said steadily, despite blood trickling from his nose. "Looks like he's having trouble breathing." One helped Dakota straighten up, but the big linebacker's face had gone pale, and he still struggled to catch his breath. The trio retreated without another word, leaving Juniper and Tyler alone with growing onlookers. "Are you okay?" Juniper asked, finally lowering her hands and turning attention to Tyler's injuries. "I should be asking you that," he said with shaky laugh. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My grandmother," she said simply, using her sleeve to gently dab blood on his upper lip. "We should get you cleaned up." Walking toward the nurse's office together, Juniper could hear whispered conversations starting behind them. By day's end, the story would be all over school, probably growing with each telling. She'd managed to stay invisible for weeks, but those days were definitely over. The confrontation rippled through Roosevelt High like stones thrown into still ponds. By next morning, everyone knew the quiet new girl had somehow taken down Dakota Mills, and the story had evolved through multiple tellings into approaching legend. Braxton found her at her locker before first period, usual confidence replaced by something harder and more calculating. Mackenzie flanked him, while still pale Dakota stood on the other side, breathing normal, but pride clearly wounded. "That was a cute trick yesterday," Braxton said without preamble. "But tricks only work once." Juniper continued organizing books, not trusting herself to speak. The encounter with Dakota had awakened something she'd been trying to keep dormant, and she could feel energy humming beneath her skin like electricity seeking ground. "We know you think you're tough now," Mackenzie added, voice pitched to carry to passing students. "But you sucker punched Dakota when he wasn't ready. That won't happen again." I warned him to stop, Juniper said quietly, closing her locker and turning to face them. I asked nicely. Well, we're done asking. Braxton stepped closer, using height advantage to loom over her. You embarrassed our friend, and that means you embarrassed us. That's not how things work here. The threat hung between them like smoke, acrid and poisonous. Students moved past, some watching with obvious interest, while others hurried by with downcast eyes, grateful not to be Braxton's focus. What do you want? Juniper asked. Public apology, Braxton said immediately. In front of everyone at lunch today, you admit you got lucky and you're sorry for attacking Dakota. And if I don't? Braxton's smile was cold and sharp. Then we make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Violent, unstable, the kind of girl who attacks people without warning. Juniper felt something twist in her stomach. She could see his threat's logic, understood how easily the narrative could shift to make her the aggressor. In school environments where perception often mattered more than truth, Braxton held most cards. I'll think about it, she said finally. You do that, Mackenzie said sweetly. But don't think too long. We're not known for patience. They walked away, leaving Juniper standing alone with pounding heart and trembling hands. The morning passed in a haze of classes and worried glances from Tyler, who'd somehow developed bruises, making yesterday's confrontation look more dramatic. During lunch period, Juniper found herself walking toward the cafeteria, despite every instinct telling her to hide in the library again. Students parted slightly as she moved through hallways, and she could feel their eyes following her progress with morbid fascination, usually reserved for car accidents. The cafeteria buzzed with nervous energy when she entered. Conversations died mid-sentence as students noticed her presence, and within moments the room had divided into two camps, those who thought she should apologize and those hoping for another confrontation. Braxton sat at his usual table in the room's center, positioned like a king holding court. He watched her approach with undisguised satisfaction, clearly believing social pressure would force compliance. Juniper walked to the cafeteria's middle and stopped, feeling hundreds of eyes focused on her small frame. The room went completely silent, except for distant kitchen dish clatter. I have something to say, she announced, voice carrying clearly in hushed space. Braxton leaned forward expectantly, ready to savor victory. Dakota Mills put his hands on Tyler Brennan yesterday, Juniper continued, voice steady and clear. I asked him to stop. He refused, so I stopped him. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the expected script. I'm not sorry for defending someone who couldn't defend himself, she said, turning slowly so her words reached everyone. And I'm not sorry for refusing to be intimidated by people who think their size or popularity gives them the right to hurt others. The silence stretched taut as wire. Braxton's face had gone red, and Mackenzie looked like she'd tasted something sour. But I am sorry, Juniper continued, that it took me this long to say something. She turned and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving behind students finally beginning to understand that the quiet new girl was anything but helpless. The retaliation came 2 days later, swift and vicious as a snake strike. Juniper was walking home through Riverside Park to avoid main streets where Braxton's crew might wait. Afternoon sun filtered through oak trees, beginning to show autumn colors, and the path was peaceful except for occasional joggers. She'd almost reached the far side when she heard footsteps behind her. Not casual walking pace, but purposeful rhythm of people with destinations in mind. Going somewhere special? Braxton's voice carried across empty grass. Juniper turned to see all three approaching, Braxton, Mackenzie, and Dakota, plus 2 other football team students. They'd spread out slightly, cutting off escape routes with casual predator efficiency. This is a public park, Juniper said, adjusting backpack straps and calculating distances to nearest populated areas. Sure is, Mackenzie agreed pleasantly. public means anyone can use it, even people who need to learn lessons about respect. They were close enough now that Juniper could see anticipation in their faces, ugly excitement from having numerical superiority and no witnesses. The park stretched empty in all directions, nearest houses hidden behind tree screens. "You embarrassed us," Braxton said, voice losing false friendliness. "Made us look weak in front of the whole school. That has consequences." Dakota stepped forward, still moving carefully but with obvious intent. "You got lucky once. Let's see how lucky you are when it's 5 against 1. Juniper felt familiar, time-slowing sensation, perception sharpening to focus on relevant details. Distance between opponents, available movement space, potential environmental weapons. Her grandmother's training had included scenarios exactly like this, preparing for situations where retreat wasn't possible and overwhelming force had to be countered with precision and strategy. "I don't want to fight you," she said, meaning it completely. "Too bad." Mackenzie pulled out her phone with malicious smile. "I'm going to record this. Make sure everyone sees what happens to girls who think they're tough." The first attack came from Dakota, still nursing wounded pride from their previous encounter. He rushed forward with both arms extended, trying to tackle her to the ground where his size advantage would be decisive. But Juniper had spent years learning to turn opponents' strength against them. She stepped aside at the last possible moment, using simple Pak-Sao deflection to redirect his momentum while adding her own energy to send him crashing into the oak tree behind her. The impact knocked wind out of him for the second time in 3 days. The other football player came next, swinging wild punches telegraphing intent from miles away. Juniper flowed around his attacks like water, using minimal movements to avoid fists while setting up counterattack. When the opening came, she struck with precise palm strike to his sternum that dropped him to his knees, gasping. "What the hell is she?" someone whispered. But Juniper was already moving, flowing into space between Braxton and Mackenzie before they could coordinate attack. Years of training taught her multiple opponents required constant motion, never allowing them to surround or corner her. Braxton finally abandoned usual confident demeanor and charged forward with desperate anger, but anger made people predictable. Juniper stepped inside his reach and applied simple chin-na technique that twisted his wrist at unnatural angle, sending him to ground with a yelp of pain. Mackenzie stood frozen, phone still recording, watching her seemingly invincible crew reduced to groaning figures on grass. When Juniper turned toward her, she took several quick backward steps. "This is self-defense," Juniper said clearly, making sure her words were captured on recording. 5 people cornered me in an empty park. I defended myself." She looked down at Braxton, who was cradling his wrist and looking up at her with something that might have been fear. "I could have hurt you," she said quietly, meant only for him. "All of you. But I chose not to. That's the difference between us." She shouldered her backpack and walked away, leaving them scattered across grass like fallen leaves. Behind her, she could hear Mackenzie's voice, shaky with shock. "Did you get that? Please tell me you got that." The video was all over social media before Juniper made it home. By Monday morning, footage had spread beyond Roosevelt High to other district schools. Students crowded around phones during passing periods, watching the quiet new girl systematically dismantle 5 attackers without breaking sweat or losing composure. The narrative had shifted completely. Where Braxton had once commanded respect through intimidation, students now whispered about how quickly he'd gone down, how his confident swagger crumbled the moment he faced someone who wouldn't be bullied. Juniper arrived at school to find Tyler waiting by her locker, face bright with something looking like relief mixed with admiration. "You okay?" he asked as she approached. "I'm fine," she said, and for the first time since transferring to Roosevelt, she actually meant it. "Good." Tyler's smile was warm and genuine, "because I was hoping you might want to eat lunch together today. In the cafeteria, I mean. Not hiding." Juniper considered this, thinking about implications of being visible again, of occupying space others might consider theirs by social hierarchy, right? "Yeah," she said finally. "I'd like that." They walked through hallways together, and Juniper noticed how other students' reactions had changed. Where before she'd been invisible or scorn object, now she received acknowledgement nods, small smiles, and something looking suspiciously like respect. In the cafeteria, they found seats at a table near windows where light was good and conversation peaceful. Other students approached throughout lunch period, some wanting to hear the story firsthand, others simply introducing themselves to the girl who'd become a legend over the weekend. Braxton and his remaining crew sat at their usual table, but the dynamic had fundamentally altered. Students no longer gravitated toward them seeking approval or acceptance. Their power structure, built on fear and social intimidation, had collapsed the moment someone refused to be afraid. "You know," Tyler said as they shared chips, "I never thanked you properly for defending me." "You don't need to thank me," Juniper replied. "It was the right thing to do." "Maybe," Tyler's eyes were serious, "but most people don't do the right thing when it's difficult. Most people just walk away." Juniper thought about her weeks of hiding, trying to remain invisible while others were hurt, choosing safety over action until choice was taken away. "I walked away for a long time," she said honestly. "I told myself it was wisdom, but really, it was just fear." And now? She looked around the cafeteria at students eating and laughing and living their lives without constantly checking over shoulders for predators. At Braxton's table, where the former school king sat subdued and diminished, learning perhaps for the first time what powerlessness felt like. "Now I understand something my grandmother tried to teach me," Juniper said. "Strength isn't about being able to hurt people, it's about being able to protect them." Tyler reached across the table and took her hand, fingers warm and steady against hers. "For what it's worth, I think your grandmother would be proud." The final bell found Juniper walking through Riverside Park again, retracing the path where everything had changed, but this time she wasn't alone. Tyler walked beside her, and they talked about books and dreams and strange ways life could shift from one moment to the next. As they reached the oak tree, where Dakota had crashed 2 days earlier, they found an unexpected figure waiting on one of the park benches. Braxton sat alone, usual entourage nowhere to be seen, posture lacking the confident arrogance that had once defined him. He looked up as they approached, and Juniper was surprised to see something in his expression that might have been genuine remorse. "I wanted to apologize," he said without preamble, words coming out rushed as if afraid he might lose nerve. "For everything, the way we treated you, the way we cornered you here. It was wrong." Juniper studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation signs, but finding only exhaustion and something looking like relief. "Why?" she asked simply. Braxton was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller than she'd ever heard it. "Because I watched that video about 50 times, and I kept thinking about how you could have really hurt us, how you chose not to, even when we deserved it." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I don't think I would have made the same choice." The admission hung in air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Braxton had never allowed himself to be. "People can change," Juniper said finally, "if they want to." "Yeah," Braxton stood from the bench, shouldering his backpack. "I hope so." He walked away through trees, leaving Juniper and Tyler alone in dappled afternoon sunlight. Around them, the park buzzed with quiet activity of people living their lives, joggers following familiar routes, families pushing strollers, teenagers playing pickup basketball on courts near parking lots. "Think he means it?" Tyler asked. Juniper watched Braxton's retreating figure disappear around a path bend. "I think he's tired of being afraid," she said. That's usually when real change becomes possible. They continued their walk through the park, talking and laughing as the sun set behind trees and painted the sky in orange and gold shades. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, new chances to choose between fear and courage, between hiding and standing up for what was right. But for now, Juniper Kellaway walked through the world without shrinking, no longer the ghost drifting between spaces, but a young woman who understood her own strength and, more importantly, knew when and how to use it. The quiet girl had found her voice, and the echo of that discovery would ripple outward far beyond Roosevelt High boundaries, touching lives in ways she was only beginning to understand.